Have you ever wondered what it truly means to be human? Where did our journey begin? Let's travel back in time, way back, to about 2.8 million years ago. This is where the story of our genus, Homo, really kicks off. Before this, our ancestors, the Australopithecines, were roaming the African savannas. They were upright, sure, but their brains were still relatively small, and their world was defined by the raw power of nature. But then, something incredible happened. A new player entered the scene, one that would change the course of evolution forever. Homo habilis, the handyman. Imagine a creature, not much taller than a modern chimpanzee, with long arms, but a face that's starting to look a little more, well, human. Their brain was bigger than their predecessors, about half the size of ours today. This might not sound like much, but that extra brain power was a game changer. Why? Because Homo habilis wasn't just surviving, they were creating. They were the original inventors, the pioneers of technology. Their invention. The old Oan stone tool. Now, these weren't fancy, polished arrowheads. Think simpler. A river cobble, a piece of flint, struck against another stone to knock off a sharp flake. It sounds basic, but this was a revolutionary leap. For the first time, an animal wasn't just using an object they found, like a stick or a rock. They were intentionally modifying an object to make a tool for a specific purpose. These sharp flakes could slice through tough animal hides to get to the meat and marrow inside, resources that were previously inaccessible. This wasn't just about getting a meal. It was about unlocking a new, high-energy food source that would fuel further brain growth. The handyman was literally building a smarter future, one stone flake at a time. But the story gets even more interesting, because Homo habilis might not have been alone. Around the same time, another character appears in the fossil record Homo Rudolfensis, found near Lake Turkana. In Kenya, this hominin had a noticeably larger brain case and a flatter, broader face than Homo habilis. For a long time, scientists debated, was this just a male Homo habilis, and the smaller fossils were females? Or was it a completely different species? The differences in skull shape are pretty significant, leading many researchers to believe they were indeed two separate species, living side by side. Think about that for a moment. Early human evolution wasn't a straight line, a single-file march of progress. It was more like a bustling family tree with many branches, a rich tapestry of different hominin species exploring different ways of being. Homo habilis and Homo rudolfensis were like two different experiments in what it meant to be an early Homo. Perhaps they specialized in different foods or lived in slightly different environments. We don't have all the answers, but it paints a picture of a dynamic and diverse world, where our lineage was just one of many possibilities. The key to their success, and ours, wasn't brute strength. Our ancestors were not the biggest or the baddest creatures on the savannah. They couldn't outrun a lion or fight off a giant hyena with their bare hands. They were small, vulnerable, and on the menu for a lot of predators. So, how did they survive and thrive? They used their minds. The development of stone tools marks a fundamental shift in our evolutionary strategy. We stopped competing on physical terms and started competing on intellectual ones. This wasn't just about individual intelligence. Making and using tools, and more importantly, sharing that knowledge, requires a new level of social complexity. You have to be able to learn from others, to cooperate. Imagine a group of Homo habilis working together. One might be the expert toolmaker, another might be better at spotting scavenging opportunities, and others might stand guard, watching for danger. They would need to communicate, perhaps with gestures and simple vocalizations, to coordinate their efforts. This is the birth of teamwork, the foundation of human society. Our ancestors realized that together, they were stronger, smarter, and safer than they could ever be alone. This new reliance on cooperation and technology created a powerful feedback loop. Better tools led to better nutrition from meat and marrow. Better nutrition fueled the growth of a larger, more complex brain. A bigger brain allowed for the creation of even better tools, more sophisticated social strategies, and enhanced communication. This cycle of innovation, cooperation, and brain growth set our ancestors on a completely new evolutionary path. It was a departure from the purely biological arms race that dominates so much of the natural world. We were beginning to build our own niche, not just adapting to the environment but actively changing it to suit our needs. We were becoming creatures of culture. The skills to make a stone tool weren't encoded in their DNA. They had to be taught and learned. This transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next is the very essence of culture, and it started right here, with these small, clever hominins banging rocks together. From this pivotal moment, the genus Homo would continue to evolve and diversify. New species like Homo erectus would emerge, with even larger brains and more advanced tools, and they would be the first to walk out of Africa and spread across the globe. But they were all standing on the shoulders of giants, or rather, on the shoulders of the handyman Homo habilis and his contemporaries. They were the ones who took the first crucial steps, who traded muscle for mind, and who discovered the incredible power of working together. So, when we look at our modern world, with its incredible technology and complex societies, it's humbling to remember where it all began. It started not with a roar, but with a spark of ingenuity. It started with a choice. To pick up a stone, not as a weapon of brute force, but as a tool of creation. It's a journey that began millions of years ago, and it's a journey we are all still a part of today. The legacy of Homo habilis is written in our DNA, in our societies, and in the very human impulse to create, to innovate, and to connect with one another. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this journey back in time fascinating, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more adventures into our incredible past. See you next time. The first technical minds now, let us see how this change began to consolidate. Because one thing is to make a tool for the first time, and something very different is to turn technique into an essential part of daily life. Homo habilis and Homo Rudolfensis did not create tools only occasionally. Over time, they began to depend on them. Stone ceased to be a passive object in the landscape and became an active part of survival. This had a direct consequence for the mind. The brain no longer merely reacted. It now learned from experience. Each tool manufactured involved trial and error. Some worked better than others. Some broke. Others proved more effective for cutting, striking, or scraping. These processes, repeated over generations, shaped a new capacity. Technical thinking. It was not just about using the hands, but about remembering, improving, and transmitting. Here a key point emerges. For a technique to persist over time, it must be observed and learned by others. This implies attention, imitation, and an early form of teaching. Although still very basic, this transmission of knowledge marks the beginning of something revolutionary. Culture. Culture does not begin with art or rituals. It begins when useful information manages to survive beyond the individual who created it. And that is exactly what was happening. Tools were not reinvented from scratch in each generation. They were refined. This technical development also modified the relationship with food. Thanks to stone tools, these early Homo were able to access new energy sources. Meat, bone marrow, tissues. Previously inaccessible, this richer diet further favored brain growth, creating a decisive evolutionary loop. More brain allowed better tools. Better tools provided more energy for the brain. But this advance came at a cost. A larger brain requires more time to develop and more care during childhood. This forced the strengthening of social bonds. Offspring needed protection for longer periods, and that was only possible through cooperation. Technical thinking and social life began to intertwine irreversibly. The environment was no longer simply a space that imposed conditions. It became a field of possibilities. A river could be a source of food. A carcass abandoned by predators could become an opportunity. A stone could become an extension of the body. At this point, evolution was no longer advancing solely through slow biological changes. Technique accelerated the process. Each innovation could modify the way an entire group lived. And for the first time, knowledge began to hold a value as important as physical strength. Without realizing it, Homo habilis and Homo rudolfensis were taking the first step towards something that would forever define our species, the ability to learn from the past in order to change the future. Cooperating to survive the final section of this chapter leads us to a fundamental idea. None of these advances would have been possible in isolation. The birth of the genus Homo is not only the story of a larger brain or a better tool. It is the story of cooperation. Life in groups ceased to be a simple coincidence and became a strategy. Sharing food increased the chances of survival. Keeping watch together reduced the risk of attacks. Learning by observing others accelerated knowledge. Basic cooperation became a powerful evolutionary advantage. This cooperation was not pure altruism. It was a logical response to a dangerous environment. Individuals who collaborated had a higher probability of surviving, reproducing, and transmitting their abilities. Natural selection began to favor not only the strongest, but also those most socially adaptable. Here's something profound occurs. The success of an individual began to depend on the group, and the success of the group depended on the ability of its members to communicate, coordinate, and place minimal trust in one another. Although structured language did not yet exist, gestures, sounds, and glances acquired new meaning. The brain continued to grow not only to make tools, but to interpret intentions, recognize allies, and anticipate behaviors. The social mind became a tool as important as the carved stone. This change marked an invisible boundary. From this point on, human evolution began to clearly differentiate itself from that of other animals, not because Homo was superior, but because it had found a new way to survive together. However, this path was not guaranteed. Many populations disappeared. The climate changed, resources became scarce. Evolution continued testing possibilities, but something was already irreversible. The genus Homo had initiated a process that could not be stopped. Dependence on the mind, technique, and cooperation, with Homo habilis and Homo Rudolfensis. Humanity did not yet exist, as we know it, but its seed had already been planted. A seed based on thinking before acting, learning from the environment, and surviving as a group. This chapter does not speak only about the past. It speaks about the origin of an idea that still defines us. The idea that no human being exists in isolation, that our greatest strength is not in muscles, but in the ability to unite minds, share knowledge, and build together. And thus, almost without realizing it, those early Homo were writing the prologue of a story that still continues.